thing with Formula One that, the highs are high and the lows are desperately low. And when someone in your team is hurt, it's horrible.
A huge crash at the Japanese GP on Sunday put driver Jules Bianchi in a coma.
The visibility was poor. We could see that there'd been some kind of impact with a trackside vehicle. And, nothing should be on that racetrack apart from race cars. You certainly shouldn't have massive, great big tractors,
And when did you first realise that he'd made contact with that vehicle?
I can't remember if I rewound it on the CCTV thing or whether there was a replay or something, but all we could see was that big heavy vehicle moved a lot.
It kind of got lifted almost.
Yeah. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, no, this isn't going to be good. I remember jumping off the pit wall and going to the medical centre quite quickly, but everything was kind of shut down. We couldn't get in. Nobody could get in. And when we knew it was bad, we knew it'd be transferred to hospital, and we knew we couldn't get into the medical centre at all. So myself and John Booth, who ran the team with, jumped in a car and headed off to the hospital. We didn't know what condition Jules was in, other than it was bad. And we knew that if it was bad, we needed to get Jules's family out there pretty quickly. So the family came out, and I'm a parent. I still think of it now. What would they think when they're getting on the plane in back in France and then heading out to Japan? It takes a long time to get there. I couldn't imagine what it would be like for them, kind of heading out to the unknown. So, there's a lot of responsibility when you're in that position. And I remember when they arrived at the hospital, and they were, just, I can't, as a parent, I can't imagine what they could be thinking. And yet they come in the room and all they're concerned about is, how are we,
Really?
It was, I've never talked about it actually. You learn a lot from stuff like that. My number one priority then was the family. You think, well, what can we do? And what we could do is, just try and ensure that the family were given the number one key thing is information, accurate information, and so I think we threw ourselves into that role to ensure that family were fully informed, that that they had the reassurance that they had the best, there was the best medical attention and everything else, and just some of the basic logistics, somewhere to stay, and I don't think we left the hospital for a few days. Just we found a corner just like this and slept on the floor. And I remember leaving a few days later. I still had my team kit on from race day, and you walk out into the sunshine, and you kind of it's only then that things actually hit home about Jules was in a really difficult position, and we just had to do everything we possibly could to help him and help the family and what have you. And so, what made it even more difficult is it was back to back. We still had a team to run, so I went to Sochi a couple of days later than planned, and quite quickly we decided that we didn't want to run the second car, and instead we wanted to send a message back to Jules that the team were going to prepare the car for him, and the message was, here's your car, we're ready for you, you fight, you do what you need to do. Another reason for doing it is we got an entire car crew there, and it's Jules's crew, and you form such strong relationships with your driver, and so we wanted them to have something to focus on as well. Otherwise, we've got a car crew, faced with a lot of time on their hands to think about stuff. So that car was prepared immaculately. that was ready to go on the grid and race in a Formula One Grand Prix. And as I say, there were two purposes. One was a focus on the team, because we needed to look after these people, and one was to send a message to Jules. Now, obviously Jules is in a very critical state, so I don't want people to think he's sitting there looking at a picture of it. That never happened. But you get my drift. It's like there's a message, and the media could see that. So they could see that we're trying to send this message. And we put we had a sign on the pit board saying we miss him, because we did.
When you left the hospital, was there hope for him still at that point?
It didn't look good. But again, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert at this, so it didn't look good. But we didn't. We knew this was very, very serious. But equally, we knew that we didn't know all of the detail about how this, how this is going to pan out. Other than we knew it was really bad, and we had to inform everyone in the team about that as well, and look after the team, because different people dealt with it in different ways. So we had some people who I thought would really struggle, who used whatever coping mechanisms they use with, and were fine. They had other, it's like 6'5" garage technicians, 140 kilograms or whatever of drinking machine or whatever, who really struggled in floods of tears, and you got to go and help everyone in the team. The other problem that we had was straight after the Sochi race, the majority owner that we had in the team, which was also linked to our main sponsors, kind of just pulled out of everything as well. So we had financial difficulties. So the team was suddenly in a significantly dangerous position. And I remember that following week. And don't get me wrong, what trumps everything in terms of concern and stress and everything is when someone's hurt. There's no question about it. But the business was now hurt as well, and we had to find a new owner very, very quickly. Luckily, we found a buyer, and the team continued in 2015. Jules was still in hospital, so in hospital in Nice this time, and so we used to fly down there and go and see him, and go and visit him in hospital. And I thought it was important to tell him, what we were doing. It's kind of one-way conversation, but I think it's really important.
Let's get a condition check on the Formula One driver Jules Bianchi, who's had surgery on a serious head injury after he crashed in the Japanese Grand Prix.
He's still in a very critical condition, Jules Bianchi, still fighting for his life.
I remember later that year I went down to see him, and I live up in Northumberland, so getting anywhere is a bit of a trek, flight-wise. There's a couple of flights to get down there. Anyway, when I go and see him, I normally stay over and then fly back the next day or whatever. And went down to see him, made the journey back, got home, and I literally just got home, and I got a call from John to say he'd passed away. And that was difficult, but I'm pleased I was in a position where I could tell him the latest on whatever was going on within the team, and something that's really important to me, because the sport's gone on, the sport's grown, but it shouldn't forget that people talk about. There's a lot of talk when we were coming in as a new team about, the existing teams need to be rewarded for how they've built the sport and this, that and the other. In my view, the sport's been built on things way more than the teams. It's people, and some people have given everything. And again, my thoughts always go back to Jules' family. They're still here. They still see the sport on TV all the time. And I think it's super important that people don't forget Jules, because he's a fantastic driver, great teammate, someone who had so much more to give as well in the sport. And I think it's important that the sport remembers remembers this. And I know from his family, they don't want people to forget. There's a foundation. They do a lot of good work for have karting events for young kids and stuff like that, and that kind of thing's important.